Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to begin taking a look at this weekend's lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. Today I'm going to start by breaking down some of the historical components of eclipses in the sign of Virgo from the last time the nodes of the moon were in Pisces and Virgo. That should be a really nice way of starting to track this eclipse for some of you who enjoy journaling and looking back historically. Of course, this will be natural. Some of you may not have that skill or have a great memory or whatever. There is also going to be a section of today's talk where I focus on 5 things to watch for. So if the tracking portion isn't for you, just know that we'll also get to 5 very basic themes you can watch for as this eclipse comes through over the weekend and in the, say, weeks and months ahead. So hopefully something for everybody today. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections if you have any, or a good story to share. Always use the hashtag grab to tell us the name of the transit and story, or email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Just don't share anything that you don't want us sharing in a future storytelling episode. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. A couple of promotions today, very briefly, take you over to the website, nightlightastrology.com, and show you. Click on the events page, go to live talks. You'll see that on April 3rd, I have my next monthly webinar on essential dignities. So if you have heard something like that planet is in its fall, or its exaltation, or its domicile, or its exile, what does that mean? How are these dignities set up? What's the logic behind them? How do you really interpret a planet's dignity condition in your birth chart? This is going to be the subject of our talk on April 3rd, and I think it'll be really helpful for you to understand dignity conditions in your birth chart, or when you're talking about them, and have a sense of what they do and don't mean, because a lot of times there are misconceptions around this topic. So that'll be our topic for April 3rd. If you can't attend live, of course, the recording will be provided for you. You can also check out our speaker series events on the 15th, 16th, and 23rd of this month. Free talks, register, and receive the link to attend webinars from 3 very talented speakers speaking on topics in ancient astrology, and also the recording will be available for those as well. Click on the Book of Readings tab, go to Need-Based Astrology Readings. You can also find my horary readings up there. But right now, tiered readings that you guys helped us create. Our course directors are at the top tier. Our seasoned tutors in our classrooms are in the middle tier, and some talented alumni getting their starts at the bottom tier. That is there so that nobody's priced out of an astrology reading. Hopefully that provides you with some flexibility for your budget, so you can get a reading if you want one. Big part of our mission here at Nightlight is to make sure astrology learning and services are accessible for people of different financial backgrounds. On that note, let's take a look at our situation, see what kind of situation our situation is in. So today is Thursday, March 13th. And our lunar eclipse is going to be coming through tomorrow. I think I might have accidentally said Saturday at the start of today's talk. That would have been a misspeak on my part if I did. The eclipse will be coming through. This is Friday, or about 3 in the morning Friday. So it's kind of tonight into tomorrow that the eclipse appears. Time zone may shift the actual date of this depending on where in the world you are at and listening from, but it is coming up imminently. It is taking place, this eclipse, at about 23 degrees of the sign of Virgo. The eclipse is configured to Uranus in a really interesting way. So you do have some Uranian pop to this eclipse, although the Uranian pop is pretty harmonious. There's a trine configured from the eclipse to Uranus, the sun to Uranus through sextile. So I like this as an eclipse that brings the breakup of familiar routines, habits, and structures, a little bit of the unexpected, but an unexpected that might be exciting, that might flip the script in a way that maybe you've hoped for or longed for, or that shakes things up in a way that you can see as immediately beneficial. Regardless, we're going to look at 5 things to watch for here in a little bit, given the focus of the lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. It's interesting to note that Mercury is also the ruler of the eclipse and preparing to go retrograde in Aries. So this eclipse does kind of, everything draws back to Aries. But again, we'll just focus on 5 things to watch for given the moon in Virgo today. What I want to do now, before we go into the 5 things to watch for portion, is go back in time, because tracking eclipses is a process of tracking karma that has a very long history behind it. Moon cycles month to month are, they plant a seed at the new moon, and then often the seed of that little gestational window and cycle of karmic activity fruits at the full moon, and that's it. It's just kind of a short 30-day cycle, kind of an average number there. When you're talking about eclipses, you are talking about a process of lunations and karmic history that is connected by many years. And so what I want to do today is take you back in time. We have the South Node in the sign of Virgo, which means that we are in a culminating phase with respect to the sign of Virgo and its archetypal themes and lessons in our birth charts. We're going to look at horoscopes tomorrow to remind you of which house this is in your chart and what topics this is connected to. But today what I want to do is take you back in time so you can do some tracking. Because the most logical place that these culminating karmic themes and lessons will be coming from will be the last time that the North Node was in the sign of Virgo, which is always about 9 years previous. The full cycle being about 18 years for the nodes of the moon. So when we go back in time and we draw the nodes of the moon to, here we go, we're going to draw them into Virgo and Pisces again, switching signs, but we're going to put the North Node in the sign of Virgo. And I want to show you, this is really the first solar eclipse that we had while in Virgo, even though the node was out of sign. I think that's important to mention. So this is a solar eclipse that took place on September 13th of 2015. I would say that you could really meaningfully track the culminating of karma that is happening right now back to a cycle that began around this time. So think about what was happening in your life, not just in September of 2015, but let's call it within 2015 through 2016. Because if you notice, I'm just going to do this very briefly, but notice if we go forward a year from right now, the node is in Virgo. If we go forward from here, we're not going to see the node, the North Node, leave Virgo until about May of 2017. So you could say September 2015 to about May of 2017. You get it right in about that 1.5 year long mark. And during that entire time, the cycle that was coming through Virgo with the North Node representing new karma, new cycles, new material for evolution is kind of seeding at that point. 9 years later, the South Node comes through and we're sort of reaping what's been sown, where it's a moment of karmic culmination or completion for a cycle that began at that time. Now, I think that's really fascinating because that gives us some way to track the meaning or connection of the events that are likely to occur from this moment going forward, say over the next 4 months, but reasonably speaking, with the South Node in Virgo now for about 1.5 years, for the next 1.5 years. So we can connect this portal of time that we are in now back to this time. Now, what I want to do is let's go backward in time a little bit. Let's roll ourselves back here to September 13th of 2015 when we had this solar eclipse in Virgo. Let me give you a very brief example from my own chart. This is the 5th house in my chart, which is the place of children and pregnancy. My wife would have our first child, Virginia, in December. Just a couple months later, we bought and moved into our first home in September of 2015. So this was a cycle that was very much connected to the beginning of life as a parent. And that was a solar eclipse taking place with the North Node type of eclipse, I should say, in my 5th house of children and pregnancy. Okay, so very, very simple. With the South Node now coming through that sign, there is a kind of natural way in which a transition is likely to occur in my life with respect to, all that began around parenting. I think that's remarkable given that my girls are both crossing really interesting developmental thresholds where they're really, really becoming, they're not babies anymore, so I noticed that right away. But with respect to other 5th house themes, I would track the connection because I can tell you off the top of my head, I could give you 4 or 5 other really interesting themes that were starting or developing around that time with respect to the 5th house in my chart, like creativity or the arts. And so on. So the point is that tomorrow when we do horoscopes, we will try to help you connect this timeline by looking at the topics of the house in your chart through rising sign horoscopes. You could listen for your sun sign as well. Okay, so back to 2015. The next meaningful solar eclipse in Virgo, which would be connected now to a lunar eclipse 9 years later with the South Node in Virgo. That's how we're tracking this. We're thinking of new karma beginning with the North Node, new themes, new developments, new passions, new interests, new learning. And now we're talking about the insights gathered, gained, harvested, cycles completing themselves with the south node returning to the same sign in place, and lunar eclipses occurring, which bring culmination 9 years later. Okay, so that's the way we're tracking it. The next major eclipse is September 1st of 2016. So if I go forward just a year, you're going to notice that, where am I? September 1st. Oh, backward. All right, here we go. So you'll see right here a solar eclipse in the sign of Virgo, September 1st of 2016. Fascinating. Major interesting for me that there is a major cycle of new beginnings with respect to my creative life. And this year I will probably be finishing my book, which is kind of a natural conclusion for where things started with this project that got sidelined by becoming a dad 9 years ago. So fascinating. Anyway, the solar eclipse in Virgo on September 1st of 2016 would be another natural point of connection to this lunar eclipse. So the solar eclipses with the north node are now going to be connected to the lunar eclipses with the south node in the same sign. So it's a new area, and then it's a harvesting or a kind of reaping of what's been sown over a 9-year period. And again, tomorrow we'll look at the whole sign house topics to give you more insight. Now, you could also, broadly speaking, given that we're looking at eclipses in Pisces along the same nodal axis, now you could look back and connect things from 9 years ago with respect to both whole sign houses. And the entire timeline, again, lasts. The North Node does not leave Virgo and enter Leo until about May of 2017. So you think September 2015 through about May of 2017, and anything that was happening through that time window may be connected to the kinds of karmic culminations that are occurring now. All right. So on that note, let's bring things back up to the present moment here. Let's get our lunar eclipse configured. So this lunar eclipse, again, happening really tomorrow for everyone listening to this. And like I said, we'll do horoscopes tomorrow. Let's now shift our attention to 5 things that we can watch for given a south node lunar eclipse in Virgo with some 9-year history behind it. Number 1 would be themes of purity or purification. Very simply, Virgo is a sign that is all about the entrance into the underworld, which is a process of purification leading us to rebirth. If you think about the underworld as a place of death, transformation, resurrection, that process occurs in the underworld, Virgo is preparing us for entrance into that period of time. So it is a kind of transitional space that is about transitions we're making that will purify us. On that level, I think back, for example, to when I was becoming a dad and getting the house ready for becoming a dad. And then that whole year and a half of becoming a dad was very purifying, psychically, emotionally, karmically. Like, wow, I learned so much. I grew so much. I had to let go of so much. I faced shadows. So that theme of purity and processes of purification. Interestingly, it was around that time that my diet started changing to more organic whole foods. I started pulling a lot of processed foods just out of my diet. So Virgo can, speak to processes of purification happening mentally, karmically, physically, dietarily, any level where there's a process of cleaning something. Very Virgoan. Number 2 would be themes of initiation. Initiation is also part of the descent into the underworld that the sign of Virgo ushers us into, where the harvest maiden is sort of a sign of youth in general. And while there's always something in us that remains clean and pure and youthful and childlike and innocent, there is also a process in this material world where we must descend into and touch the earth and touch darkness. This is, sometimes you'll see the image of Virgo as a maiden looking like an angel, and her feet are hovering above the ground and she has wings. The idea here being that there's some part of us that remains eternally pure, but that has to also touch the earth, touch mortality, touch death, touch shadow. And that is a tension that's very often strenuous for Virgos, perfection and imperfection being one example of that dichotomy. So the theme of initiation is important for Virgo, where something is going to initiate us into the dark, the shadow, the messiness, the adult, the imperfect, the impure. And we have to be able to accept that descent in order to return, not having lost our purity, but having learned and grown and sort of individuated, as well as been initiated into the earth. So themes of initiation become big. And I look back at that time in my life. Again, I'm just reflecting on one simple level. Becoming a dad was a major initiation in my life. Themes of forgiveness. So one of the things that happens is, to whatever extent we can control how good, pure, right, true, effective something is, we will. And we know that in a certain way, the universe judges our results morally. If you don't take care of your crops, you won't get a good harvest. There's a kind of measuring and checks and balances, and there's like an algebra equation that is at work in the universe that is governed by laws that we have some rational insight and awareness of, and we try to behave and act according to those standards so that we will be judged favorably. And that is a part of life that everyone has to learn. You act and behave in a certain way, and you get treated in a certain way. There's a kind of a system of checks and balances that Virgo is very aware of, very attentive to, very conscientious about. And there's also laws at work in the way in which the universe unfolds that transcend the algebra and karmic equations. And that is where we need things like compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, surrender, letting go, because there's only so much we can control. We do the best we can, and we let some other factors like mystery, magic, grace take over when we've done the best we can, we can't do anymore. So there's often themes of having to accept, surrender, let go, forgive. Not surprisingly, some of the themes that are often constellating around Pisces. Number 4 would be themes of learning and skill development. Virgo is a sign that often translates into becoming more crafty or developing expertise or skill or ability or intelligence or learning or understanding, practical, useful things that can be developed when the South Node is culminating in the sign of Virgo. I think, for example, of all of the practical skill development that I was learning, the practical skills I was learning, I should say, when the North Node was in Virgo in 2015, 16, early 2017, because I was a new dad. And again, I don't mean to what's that saying? Beat a dead horse. I don't mean to say the same thing over and over, but that's the most basic thing that I can think of to convey how to connect those previous years when you're working with them. Think about the ways in which what you were learning, what skills you were developing, where you were like, oh, I've never done this before, and I have to develop some new abilities. Very Virgo. Number 5 would be themes of preparation and judgment. There is a very critical way in which we have to design and develop things with a high standard, and a standard or a sense that our actions are going to be evaluated. And I don't mean to talk out both sides of my mouth, because I just said forgiveness, acceptance, surrender. However, there's also the other side, which is that sometimes we have to legitimately get better at things, or we're going to receive a bad grade. And to whatever extent the universe works in that way, Virgo will make us more aware of it. Like, your child is going to be malnourished unless you feed them properly. It's like a very simple Virgoan truth that I was learning as a dad, right? Along with my wife, like not just eating for ourselves, but having to feed another being. And I remember the breastfeeding schedule transitioning into the first basic foods, and then, reflecting on our diet and wanting to change our diet so that we were, healthy parents that could convey nutrition to our child. I mean, you got to get better. And as much as we hate to hear that, because we're like, well, I'm not someone who judges or whatever. It's like, yeah, but there's a very basic level of life where it's like, if you don't hydrate, if you don't rest, if you don't sleep, if you don't take care of your body, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, this world does have a kind of karmic cause and effect mechanism that will grind you down, wear you out, bring you sickness, bring you disease, bring you enslavement, bring you frustration. And so effort is required. Conscientious, dedicated, meticulous, careful, thoughtful, those qualities have to be developed. And to whatever extent they are not being developed, we will often experience results that make us aware of the need to develop. So just remember that their Virgo South Node seasons can be very, very basic karmically. Like, you haven't done this, and now this result is coming. Or you did do this, and you put good practices into place, and here's a benefit. So just know that South Node Virgo moments can feel very cumulative, like what you have reaped, what you have sown, you will reap what you have sown. Sorry, that's what I'm trying to say. So keep that in mind, alongside of the fact that there are going to be things that happen like that also bring up this amazing capacity for forgiveness, acceptance, surrender, just like, okay, so I didn't do the best I could. Now I can reform, I can change, I can grow, I can learn, etc. So some things to watch for, and some cycles to connect them to. I hope that this was useful for all of you as you are experiencing this. Tomorrow we will do horoscopes, so stay tuned for more at that point in time. And I hope that you have a very good eclipse. I find it really useful to do something ritualistic around eclipses, lighting a candle on an altar, saying a prayer, going on a walk, anything you can. Don't be superstitious about eclipses. In my experience, it works better to acknowledge them and be reverent and appreciative in a devotional spirit. It's amazing how much easier it is to work through eclipses with that attitude. Just my thoughts. Hope you're having a good one. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.